This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The latest on the global race to find a vaccine for the novel coronavirus. Egypt eases curfew measures as Muslims begin the holy month of Ramadan. And the dilemma for parents fighting to fulfill learning needs of children as schools remain closed. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. The IMF approves about $360 million to help the DRC combat the coronavirus pandemic. And De Beers cuts diamond forecast by 7 million carats for this year. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We start with the latest COVID-19 figures. Confirmed cases have topped 2.6 million globally. Over 180,000 people have died. The Chinese mainland confirmed 10 new infections on Wednesday. 6 of them were people returning from abroad. Heilongjiang province reported 3 local transmissions, while Guangdong had 1. The United States has confirmed more than 17,000 new cases. It now has nearly a third of the world's total. Meanwhile, nearly half of all cases are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the hardest hit. Spain is the second country to pass 200,000 cases. The situation in the United Kingdom is worsening rapidly, with over 134,000 cases and 18,000 deaths. And Turkey is now a major hotspot, with confirmed infections approaching 100,000. Well, Germany's aggressive response to the coronavirus pandemic has been praised as one of the strongest in Europe. But despite some businesses reopening, Chancellor Angela Merkel says the crisis in that country is still in its early stages. Merkel is worried that Germans are relaxing their social distancing efforts. This after the federal and regional governments agreed to reopen some shops this week. Germany has the 5th highest COVID-19 caseload behind the United States, Spain, Italy and France, but has kept fatalities down after early and extensive testing. Germany's neighbor Austria is also relaxing COVID-19 control measures while keeping its death rates quite low. Well, let's put this into perspective. We're now joined by our reporter Ira Spitzer, live in Berlin. Ira, let's start with the fact that Germany and Austria are displaying a sense of cautious optimism. Tell us more about the decision to relax some of these COVID-19 control measures.
Well, things have certainly changed significantly here in Germany over the last couple weeks, and we've also seen that in Austria, Germany's neighbor to the south. And in both of these countries, the key factor that health officials and government officials were looking at was the rate of new infections, how quickly those new infections were spreading, and crucially, the reproduction rate of new infections. Now, we heard from Germany's Health Institute recently that they believe that that number in Germany is now below 1. So what that means is that in their view, an infected person is now on average infecting less than one other person, which means that the number of new cases will decrease. So taking that into consideration, they made this decision to do this sort of staggered opening of society again, starting with opening some non-essential shops. Any shop under 800 square meters in Germany now can reopen, but there's still a lot of caution here. There are new rules coming into effect which will require everyone to wear masks when shopping or on public transportation. And if that reproduction rate were to go above 1 again, I think we would see some of these changes dialed back. But certainly big news here.
And Ira, of course, as we know, the race for a vaccine or a cure or effective treatment is certainly a global one, with Germany and Austria also involved. We're hearing reports, though, that Austria is calling for blood donations from recovered COVID-19 patients. Tell us more about that clinical trial.
Well, there's certainly a lot of optimism or hope, I would say, in Austria and around the world for the potential of using the blood from recovered COVID patients, their plasma, which contains those critical antibodies which the body has developed to fight off the virus. So to use that blood in order to treat people who are suffering from the condition. Now, this is still in its relatively early stages. I say there is optimism, but that doesn't mean that this blood will prove to be a very effective treatment in the end. But certainly authorities are taking that possibility very seriously and are now trying to gather as much blood as they can from recovered COVID patients. And certainly that would be a very cost-effective way to treat COVID patients, and also would be in some ways much easier to carry out than other types of treatment. You don't have necessarily drug companies involved and things of that nature. So hope there, but we don't really know yet quite how that's going to play out.
And we know, Ira, that this has been a very testing time for a number of European countries. When it comes to the search for an effective treatment, are countries collaborating? I mean, we've heard, for instance, that the UK is already moving towards human trials this week.
Right. Well, the people I've spoken with, I spoke recently with the head of the German regulatory body that approves of vaccines, and I asked him about whether there was collaboration, cross-border collaboration on the development of vaccines as well as treatments, but specifically vaccines. And he did say that in general, this type of science is something that relies heavily on collaboration, not just in this time, but across the board. There's research that is shared, and scientists are eager to share their findings. So I do think that what's happening in the UK is not necessarily in a vacuum from what's happening here in Germany. But that being said, as some of these potential vaccines get closer to the market, I do think that the key research is happening on the campuses of the people who are developing it. So I don't know quite how extensive that sharing is, but I don't think it's a situation where countries and companies are protecting their research and are completely unwilling to share, because the race for a vaccine, it's not just going to be one company that provides the vaccine. They really would like as many companies as possible to have vaccines approved, and that would enable them to ramp up production faster as well.
Indeed, a global pandemic certainly calls for global collaboration. Thank you so much, Ira Spitzer there, joining us live from Berlin. Well, turning to the continent now, governors in Nigeria are endorsing an interstate lockdown for another 2 weeks to help contain the spread of the coronavirus. Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja.
The governor of Ekiti State, Kayode Fayemi, is maintaining that only essential services will be allowed across states during the 2-week period. Mr. Fayemi says the governors agreed to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak at state level as the best way of containing the spread of the virus in communities. He says that the virus has spread to over 25 states out of 36. The announcement was made after the Minister of Health, Osagie Ehanire, said he was concerned about the spread of the disease. Mr. Ehanire called for a more proactive response towards empowering hospitals. Many states had earlier announced the closure of their boundaries to check the spread of coronavirus, but despite such closures, a lot of Nigerians still travel to and from such states. According to Mr. Fayemi, the new agreement means that the interstate travel ban is now nationwide. Governor Fayemi said the governors also agreed to work with Health Ministry to ensure health workers are provided with personal protective equipment and are constantly trained on how to use it. This development is in line with President Muhammadu Buhari's resolve to curb the further spread of the disease and bring an end to the pandemic in Nigeria. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The Egyptian government has eased lockdown restrictions ahead of Ramadan. The nighttime curfew has been pushed back by 1 hour. It will begin at 9 p.m. instead of 8 p.m., but still end at 6 a.m. Commercial areas and shops will be open again on weekends to reduce crowding during the week, and a number of public services are also set to resume. But places of worship will remain closed during the Islamic holy month, and communal iftar meals meant to break the daily fast are still cancelled. Well, let's bring you more on this. We're now joined live by our reporter Adel Al-Makhraoui in Cairo. Adel, considering that Egypt has some of the highest infection rates of COVID-19 on the continent, talk us through what's informed the decision to relax anti-COVID measures in Egypt over Ramadan.
So basically, the government says it is still expecting that the infection rates will increase in the coming weeks. But despite these speculations, the government still believes that it is capable to accommodate for the numbers, and still the rate of COVID-19 infection is within control. And that's why it has taken the decision, which quite surprising actually, to relax the measures during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, the relaxation measures given will start with, first of all, resuming some of the public services, some of which like notary services, vehicle registrations, and inheritance declaration and division by courts. These will be the first wave of government bundle of services that will start with right after this weekend. The postponement of the curfew to start from 8 to 9 is expected to give Egyptians a more relaxed transportation around iftar time, or the time at sunset where Muslims break their fasting and have their iftar meal. That will ease the traffic a bit around that, and it is the traffic congestion and the crowding at markets is what has been concerning the government, according to the Prime Minister's declaration. It's the same reason that has made the government open shops and markets and shopping malls during the weekend, so that it would lift the pressure of these commercial areas throughout the week.
Well, of course, as you say, some measures have been relaxed, but tell us more about how Egyptians are personally planning to balance their obligations to stay safe because of COVID-19 while still observing religious activities during Ramadan. Right, I'm not sure if you heard me there.
It's quite a challenge for Egyptians. It's a month that people are quite used to gatherings, going out, enjoying their days and enjoying entertainment in general. So despite the relaxed measures that the government has announced, it is actually not giving any indications, or there isn't any significant change on the general feeling of how Egyptians are going to welcome Ramadan. This is by far the least exciting Ramadan that comes in decades and maybe centuries, because of the entire restrictions, and even with a little bit of liberty that the government has provided, people are still concerned to go and visit families and friends, fearing that they might be a reason for spreading the infection. I've talked to several Egyptians in the market. Let's have a listen in the following report.
For centuries, Muslims have been celebrating Ramadan. This year, they will have to review how they celebrate the holy month that used to bring people together the most.
There are traditions that we'll have to let go of because we're in an emergency. Family gatherings or having iftar in public places is old Cairo. I will not be able to see my sisters this year. All families now understand that social distancing is vital to keep us safe.
The pandemic has put many under financial strain, making it difficult to prepare for a month that usually sees Egyptians spending triple.
There are things we can still do to enjoy Ramadan, like getting decorations for our streets. I wanted to buy lanterns for the kids, but I could not afford it. I'm trying to make the kids as excited as possible, but Ramadan this year is totally different. We can't move as freely, and because of work restrictions, I'm not spending as usual.
Egypt has been shutting down mosques for weeks to enforce social distancing measures. That will continue in Ramadan, depriving millions of their public Ramadan night prayers.
Banning the prayers is very hard on me. This is an opportunity that is only available once a year, and it makes us connect with Ramadan. It is also related to mass gathering, and that is a concern. Ramadan is totally different this year.
Stretching into Ramadan, the pandemic is hitting Muslims in Egypt and the world where it hits the most. Measures to control the disease will be depriving many from their favorite moments in the year. So Egyptians will have to come up with new ways to enjoy the holy month this year. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, meanwhile, China has extended its expertise and support to Egypt as well as other countries. Earlier, we caught up with an Egyptian scholar who was among those calling for stronger China-Africa cooperation during this pandemic.
African countries appreciate the remarkable achievement made by China in the fight against pandemic and the important contribution they have made to safeguarding global public health security. The Chinese medical team not only explained the pandemic prevention and control knowledge through video connection and answered questions on the spot. Some medical teams went directly to Africa to cooperate with us. We will continue to learn from China experience, strengths, bilateral health cooperation, and work together to achieve the final victory in the fight against pandemic.
Well, in Somalia, Ramadan celebrations will also be different this year. Many are feeling the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic as the country prepares for the start of the Islamic holy month. Here's Abdulaziz Bilo with more.
Somalis are doing last-minute shopping ahead of Ramadan, a month of fasting and prayers for the Muslim community that is set to commence on Friday. Traders usually make good sales during this period, but unlike previous years, the markets are mostly empty, with only a handful of people coming out to purchase items. Despite the increasing number of COVID-19 cases, locals are not wearing face masks at this market, despite government directives to do so and observe social distancing.
The threat from the coronavirus has created serious impact for us, especially during Ramadan. In the past, people came shopping together, fasted together, and in the evening enjoyed meals together. But now there is a distrust among people for fear of contracting the virus.
COVID-19 has also hurt remittances, mostly sent home by expatriates. COVID-19 infections among the Somali community in Europe and the US have gone up, with many losing their jobs, businesses and income. And with many unable to send money this month, there are concerns that many families will need urgent assistance to help them cope during the holy month of Ramadan. Meanwhile, in Mogadishu, the police chief has announced increased measures for the month of Ramadan, with extended curfew hours and restrictions on public places, hotels and restaurants.
On day one of Ramadan, we have revised our curfew hours by 1 hour. It will start from 7 p.m. and not 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Restaurants will remain closed and only open until 5 p.m. every evening and offer takeout services. The priority is public safety, and we will not relent in implementing the curfew until we stop the spread of the virus.
However, the government has been unable to close mosques in efforts to limit public gatherings. Instead, it has urged clerics to ensure worshippers enforce social distancing measures while attending prayers. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Let's take a short break now. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Amid lockdowns, a South African volunteer fights to get food to the poor. And trying anything that could work, Ivorians turn to neem tree products to strengthen immunity.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them.
in the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Let's head over to the Democratic Republic of Congo now. The country is easing coronavirus measures in the capital, Kinshasa, 2 weeks after imposing a lockdown. Businesses providing essential goods and services in the commercial hub of Gombe have been allowed to reopen. Chris Ochamringa has that report.
Motorists with a pass issued by the DRC government are allowed to enter Gombe, the commercial hub of Kinshasa. The area was off limits to most people for 2 weeks because it had the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the city. The government has extended the lockdown for 2 more weeks, but allowed businesses providing essential goods and services to operate. Some of those who have to carry on adhering to the lockdown are unhappy about it.
We understand that our leaders are trying to save lives by extending the lockdown in Gombe. But how are we going to pay rent and feed our families? Most of us earn a daily wage.
The government has also made it compulsory for Kinshasa residents to wear masks when out in public.
Our leaders should allow more people to operate in the city now that they've ordered us to wear masks. I believe the masks will limit the spread of the coronavirus.
People without masks will face a fine of about $3. Kinshasa is the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic in the DRC. The government imposed a partial lockdown in the central business district that started on the 6th and ended on the 20th of April. But that shutdown led to an increase in business activity in other areas. Few people there observe social distancing measures.
If you visit areas like Gambela or Masina, you'll find crowds of people talking very close to each other. Health officials advised us to stay 1 meter apart, but people there don't respect that. Some policemen just watch helplessly.
The government had considered extending the confinement zone to other areas in the city after a rise in COVID-19 cases, but the idea has been put on hold. The COVID-19 task force in Kinshasa says it managed to detect 30 cases of the disease during the initial period of the lockdown. Health teams will now start a door-to-door search of patients in the Gombe neighborhood to curb the spread of the disease. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced a $26 billion assistance package. The coronavirus shutdown has paralyzed most economic activities, leaving thousands in need of urgent support. Sumitra Naidu found one South African that's trying to help his community.
Ramatsobane Tlhopane is from Sharpeville, a township south of Johannesburg, infamously known for anti-apartheid protests in which hundreds died 60 years ago. That history has shaped Tlhopane's view of life, which is why he wanted to ease some of the pain this lockdown is causing.
From my house, I could see the lockdown is really taking strain on these people, especially people that live in shacks, people that are disadvantaged. And then immediately I rushed to my wallet and checked only $100. This $100, what is it going to do? I said, no, fine. Let me go to the nearest local tuck shop, and then I spoke to the owner.
With just $5, Tlhopane bought a few loaves of bread to help his community. He sets up a few pallets and leaves the bread there so those in need can grab a loaf.
I don't get funding. I do it from my pocket. And then I asked everybody who's around to contribute. I managed to negotiate with the bread, the manufacturers. They are giving me bread for 5 rand. So now I start posting on Facebook also for people to contribute.
The need is great though, but Tlhopane's compassion is strong, and those who know him are stepping in to help. Tlopane is now managing to get bread worth over $166 and is managed to diversify his offerings with instant porridge, coffee, powder milk and soup.
We were not expecting to get such things. Now that we are getting this bread, I am able to eat with my child and grandchild.
We created hope for these people. Every day they are anticipating something from us. Even the kids, we're definitely going to continue after the lockdown.
Tlopane wants to continue his free bread project even after life goes back to normal in Sharpeville. That's because most breadwinners won't have jobs to return to once the lockdown is lifted. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Sharpeville, South Africa.
Algeria has recorded more than 2,500 COVID-19 infections. And to further contain the spread of the virus, the government has imposed a partial quarantine in many states. The closure of schools has forced nearly 10 million students to stay at home. To help students continue learning, the Ministry of Education and Algerian TV have launched a program called Keys to Success. The program is broadcast according to a timetable suitable for every level of education.
This initiative from the Ministry of Education is intended for students to complete their remaining lessons during the third semester so that the study program continues. This initiative will succeed and save the school year.
This program was the embodiment of the emergency plan approved by the Ministry of Education in the framework of confronting the coronavirus and the success of the imposed quarantine. Now we are ready with all capabilities to overcome the stage.
Now, in Cote d'Ivoire, parts of the neem tree have long been used in the traditional treatment of malaria. Some are now taking neem concoctions to protect themselves from COVID-19. But medical experts warn against scientifically unproven remedies. Here's Jane Kyo with more.
Like in many parts of Africa, Cote d'Ivoire residents have been using the neem tree to treat a variety of diseases. In fact, many use it to treat and prevent malaria. But with the arrival of coronavirus in the West African nation, the tree is now enjoying renewed interest. It's largely seen as a prevention against the virus.
I've learned that neem can cure coronavirus, so I came to buy some to go prepare. My family and I are going to drink the concoction to protect us from coronavirus disease.
In Africa, we use neem leaves to cure malaria. With these leaves, I make a concoction that I drink. I also put some in a bucket to make a steam bath. I am not sick, but I do this as a preventive measure.
It's brisk business for the sellers as the renewed interest in the plant pushes locals to stock up.
People rarely used to buy it. But since the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, more and more people are coming to buy it. They say it cures the disease. I'm happy about it because it allows me to increase my income.
But there being no known cure for the coronavirus, medical experts are warning against this. They believe that it would encourage reckless social behaviors that will escalate the spread of the disease.
Many people think that by using neem leaves, they will not get the disease. This belief is completely false and should stop. It is true that neem leaves are effective against malaria, but they do not contain hydroxychloroquine. Moreover, some studies have reported that neem leaves have anti-inflammatory activity in the body. However, we know that in the treatment of COVID-19, it is totally forbidden to use anti-inflammatory drugs. This is therefore an additional reason to call on people to avoid the temptation to use these leaves.
Apart from being used to make pharmaceutical products, the fast-growing neem tree is also used in production of beauty products and pesticides. Jane Keo, CGTN.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The IMF approves $360 million to help the DRC combat the coronavirus pandemic. And De Beers cuts diamond forecast by 7 million carats for this year.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Now, the International Monetary Fund will provide a $363 million loan to the Democratic Republic of Congo in order to help them handle the impact of the coronavirus. Now, the money was approved on Wednesday by the fund's board. It will help the DRC manage falling revenues and increased spending needs due to the virus. So far, COVID-19 has claimed at least 25 lives and infected more than 370 people in Africa's biggest copper producer. Now, the DRC relies on mining for more than 95% of its export earnings. However, restrictions put in place to contain the spread of the ongoing pandemic have placed difficulties on mining companies operating in the country. Elsewhere, Anglo American will mine significantly fewer diamonds this year than it previously planned to. Now, the decision comes as the group contends with a complete shutdown of the global supply chain. The ongoing coronavirus pandemic has crippled an already reeling diamond industry. As a result, many companies have opted to preserve their cash and suspend payments of declared dividends. Now, Anglo American, for instance, has slashed its capital spending by about $1 billion this year. It's also cut operational spending by $500 million. At the same time, its De Beers unit will cut its full-year production forecast by 7 million carats to a maximum of 27 million carats. Now, as the global economy faces a significant downturn due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Egypt's largest startup accelerator is offering companies access to investment and support. Falak's goal is to ensure that firms are able to weather the current crisis, and they're also provided with support to harness opportunities that may result from this pandemic. Here's CGTN's Adel El Maroui with the details.
To restrict the rate of COVID-19 infection, Egypt has shut shops on weekends and imposed a night curfew daily starting 6 o'clock in the evening. That has led to a great demand on online shopping and other digital solutions.
I think the area that has become very visible is the e-commerce area. Many traditional businesses that are in a situation where their stores, their physical distribution channels are closed, are looking for avenues to move their business or to move their sales online very quickly. They never thought that they would be forced to get into e-commerce with that speed. But the one silver lining about what's happening is that it's accelerating adoption of commerce, trade, fintech, online in an unprecedented way.
While this is the time the startup ecosystem was looking for, funding is becoming an issue.
Usually people from a behavioral angle, they don't like investing in a crisis time, so they just want to see things settling down before they're ready to deploy the cash. Entrepreneurs are trying to also understand the new customer needs. Some of them, their companies are on hold because of the curfews and closures and lockdowns. So they're trying to assess after that phase ends, what is my business going to look like?
But government-initiated funds are still flowing. Falak, the biggest accelerator in Egypt, is launching a special round for direct investments.
It's pretty much the time for us to step up and really take some extra initiatives to make sure that our portfolio companies as well as the general ecosystem stays afloat during these difficult times.
Falak is selecting startups directly involved in assisting the market under the pandemic restrictions.
We decided to narrow it down a little bit more on things that would solve the current situation. We are favoring 3D printing, not 3D printing for toys, but for 3D printing for PPEs, which is the personal protection equipment for medical personnel, as well as fintechs that would help the usage of digital currency and not the usage of cash, to limit contact between people. Insurance tech to make sure that the ones that are not insured can have access to quick insurance for health insurance, and things on that front, just because these are urgent matters that we'd love to support quickly.
While most investors are reluctant to step in a struggling economy, support and funds from accelerators and incubators are picking up. They want to help the country. Falak Startups is going to give $63,000 to each of the winners of its COVID-19 special round. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now. Most parts of the country are under lockdown and local markets remain closed as, of course, the need for social distancing becomes more critical. That has led to a number of Nigerians turning to online shopping for their essential needs. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with the story.
This is what most typical markets in Nigeria look like. They're usually jammed with high human activities. It's difficult to maintain physical distancing in this kind of environment, and it's the reason most markets in the country are now shut down. In Lagos, in order to make for physical distancing, authorities established what they call COVID-19 special markets like this one. Stores are spaced out and the number of sellers are restricted, but despite the measure for their essential needs.
So I'm trying as much as possible to stay away from people, not to get any contact with anybody who might be infected with the virus. So I prefer to take online orders to get them to deliver it at my doorstep, and I also try to maintain social distance and personal hygiene while I get the order from whoever is delivering the product to me.
Most of the items being shopped for online are essential products which courier service firms are allowed to deliver to shoppers. For this reason, most online platforms dealing in essential products are now springing up. And more established platforms like Jumia have put out a statement on its platforms making it clear it is only prioritizing essential products. But in all, users say the online experience has not been all too smooth.
It's not been really good, unlike the way it was before the lockdown, because I could recollect a time I was trying to get some food stuff from a particular online store. I know that the delivery guy came very late, and he gave an excuse of we had a lot of places to go to because he was the only one on duty, and that's because they had few people who were ordering unlike what it used to be before the lockdown. So he got to my house very late.
In addition to that, there's also the twin problem of cost of data and the quality of internet, all combining to prevent online retail platforms from making a keel from the prevailing situation.
By the time you open an app, before you know it, your data is running very fast, and the app you're opening is very slow. So before you try to even finish your transaction, you've exhausted a lot of data, and the internet has not been really good.
Despite the challenges, Adeshawa says she's still better off than exposing herself to COVID-19 by going to a brick-and-mortar shop for her essential needs. But in a country where millions live below the poverty line and internet access, smartphones and computers are still very expensive luxuries, they would have no choice than continue to patronize open markets. And with a market like this, the authorities are trying to make the shopping experience as safe as possible. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, on the international front, the United States is closing its doors to some immigrants. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order temporarily stopping the issuing of green cards to protect what the head of state argues as American jobs during the coronavirus pandemic. From the White House, here's CGTN's Nathan King with more on that.
Will do. The US President planting a tree at the White House to mark Earth Day and using the occasion to declare he would be opening up the national parks soon. But the majority of state governors, and judging by the polls, the majority of American people, want the stay-at-home orders to remain in place until his own federal guidelines are met in the fight against the coronavirus.
I get the pressure, but we can't make a bad decision. Frankly, this is no time to act stupidly, period. I don't know how else to say it. And I've said it innumerable times to local officials on the phone. I get the pressure, I get the politics, we can't make a bad decision, and we can't be stupid about it.
The lack of testing and fears about how far the virus has really spread are fueling these concerns. On Wednesday, a California county announced that new autopsy results show COVID-19 was spreading in the US in mid-January, weeks before the first previously known US death. And it was spreading among people with no travel connection to Wuhan.
We know that each of these deaths, especially since there are 3 of them in February and early March, they're really like iceberg tips. So they're indicators when you have an outcome like death or ICU, that means that there's some iceberg of cases of unknown size that underlie those iceberg tips.
That means the US is likely to have had many more unrecorded cases and deaths than previously thought, and that health officials were unaware of the early spread of the virus. And disappointing news for a drug that the US president touted enthusiastically and often from here at the White House. Hydroxychloroquine in US trials was found to have negative effects on patients. And one senior US health official says he's been removed from his post because he refused to push the president's favorite drug. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
Now, the strict measures that have been put in place to fight the spread of COVID-19 are hurting economies in Latin America. As CGTN's Paulo Cabral now explains, the crisis is only beginning for a region heavily dependent on exports and impacted by plummeting commodity prices.
The state of São Paulo is one of many regions in the world where only essential businesses can operate during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's the case of this bakery and snack bar, which is the only shop still open in this usually busy central street. But also sales have dropped dramatically as people stay at home and food services were limited to takeout and delivery. The owner says he had to fire 7 of his 11 employees to keep the store afloat.
From a business point of view, it's not really viable for me to keep the shop open. I only open the doors because I have customers that have been coming here for many years, and we feel we have to keep serving them.
Expectations are deteriorating. 4 weeks ago, a central bank survey of average market expectations forecast GDP growth of almost 1.5% this year. In last week's report, the forecast was a contraction of almost 2%, which was increased to nearly 3% in this week's bulletin. And some say this may be too optimistic.
I'm afraid that if the pandemic gets stronger here in Brazil, we can have a huge drop in the GDP. We can go up to 10%. So there will be a lot of long-term damage. So we are going to recover after the crisis. We're going to recover fast, but I'm afraid that we'll be not able to get where we was before.
There is little doubt that social distancing measures to fight COVID-19 will hurt economies around the world, but the people likely to feel the sting the most will be found in large numbers in countries where income inequality is already extreme, like Brazil and other countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. The UN's Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, CEPAL, estimates a drop of 5.3% in the region's GDP this year, and 30 million people crossing the poverty line downwards.
Here at CEPAL, we have calculated that governments will need to spend 2.2% of the GDP to give all people enough income to lift them off extreme poverty. And if that income was planned to lift people out of poverty, that will cost about 4.7% of the GDP. So it doesn't seem so hard to think about the idea of a universal minimum income for all citizens.
A severe economic slowdown seems impossible to avoid now. Getting people, especially the poor, to live through the pandemic is a big challenge to many governments. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, São Paulo.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll be taking a look at Burkina Faso and Ghana's decisions to ease restrictions amid the coronavirus threat. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lydia.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, we look at how the coronavirus pandemic is affecting the film industry in Nigeria.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Nigeria's film industry, also known as Nollywood, is recording losses as the country battles to contain the coronavirus pandemic. According to the United Nations, Nollywood is the second largest film industry in the world, producing about 1,500 movies per year. CGTN's correspondent Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja.
Nigerian filmmakers have halted productions like this across the country as a result of the coronavirus outbreak. Movie producers in Nigeria say this has had a huge toll on them.
Just making one film, producers make over hundreds of millions of naira. Now, it means that because of the coronavirus pandemic, thousands of movies are not going to be made. That means that all that money that is supposed to have been made during this period is going down the drain. So the film industry and producers are losing a lot of money as a result of the coronavirus pandemic.
Aside from film production, the cinema business in Nigeria is also seeing a significant loss of revenue, estimated at about $2.6 million a month, according to the Cinema Exhibitors Association of Nigeria. Already, big movie releases earlier slated for the coming months have all been postponed until people are able to visit cinemas again. The Nollywood industry is estimated to employ millions of people and generate more than $7 billion for the economy annually, accounting for around 1.4% of Nigeria's gross domestic product. Economic experts say Nigeria's government may need to focus on industries like Nollywood as global oil prices slump.
Well, no gainsaying that oil is no longer a viable option for Nigeria's economy. As of today, oil remains a major contributor to Nigeria's GDP. And with dwindling oil prices occasioned by lockdown imposed on most economies across the world, the government must now look to other sectors for the much needed foreign exchange. So having said that, the country stands to lose a whole lot more if certain other sectors like the Nigerian film industry, aka Nollywood, it remains unattended to.
The government in March announced a $2.7 billion intervention fund for industries, including Nollywood, to soften the effect of COVID-19. And film producers are confident the industry will bounce back eventually.
It's a creative industry, so we'll be able to create new compelling stories that we will produce and showcase them to Nigeria and to the rest of the world. I can tell you that while staying at home at the moment, I've been able to come up with a lot of beautiful and these wonderful ideas that after all of this is over, I will produce them and showcase them to within Nigeria and to the rest of the world. That way, we're able to make more money and generate revenue and bounce back.
President Muhammadu Buhari says the lockdown could be extended for as long as health officials advise, and that people will need to continue to practice social distancing until COVID-19 is defeated.
The hope is that efforts by the government to contain the spread of coronavirus pays off soon enough for Nigeria's movie industry to get back on its feet again. And also millions of talented people can continue to benefit from the industry as well as contribute to Africa's largest economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Your sports news coming up next. Still ahead, Cairo International Stadium joins the fight against the coronavirus.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
We start your sports news in North Africa, where Egypt's Cairo International Stadium has joined the fight against COVID-19 by advocating for people to stay at home. A special advertisement has been displayed showing support for the sporting community in the fight against the novel coronavirus. Egypt has been implementing temporary closures of schools, restaurants, malls, museums and archaeological sites, as well as suspending flights and halting sporting activities. Egypt confirmed 169 new cases on Wednesday, bringing the total number of infections in the country to 3,659.
The initial rules to keep them health in the house, to stay safe actually, and we support our doctors, physicians actually for their efforts that they are doing in all over the world, not only in Egypt, but in Egypt we keep ourselves to push everything, and we always doing the thing for the family to keep themselves in house, to be safe.
Italy's sports minister Vincenzo Spadafora says the government is still not ready to set a date for Serie A teams to start training again